Whoa, I'm here. I am not at the ceiling. All right. Yeah. All right. Adriana, are we good to go?
I believe we're live.
Awesome. Jordan, welcome. I have to say I hadn't looked at who was going to be joining, and I hopped on to get the debrief from Adriana, and I was like, "No shit," and Jordan's on here.
I hope that was a good thing. Sometimes, no shit. What are you doing here? That was not that one. Yeah,
No. That was a absolutely good thing. As in, this is going to be a blast. So,
looking
super
forward to it.
excited to have you on. How's your year off to a start?
Oh, it's going pretty good actually. Kicking off a bunch of campaigns for clients and working on some new AI tech to be able to read more information from job descriptions programmatically. So, off to a great start. How about you?
Fantastic on our end. It's been a little late coming getting this back up and going, but I can't think of a better person to have on with us for our inaugural one of 2023. Um,
Amazing.
awesome. Really quick, you're out of San Francisco, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm here in the hub.
Awesome. And then you touched on it, but what are you doing out there?
Yeah, so most of what I do is outbound by pay, not persona. And so, really, what my agency attempts to do is to figure out a what do your customers know that maybe you don't. Where is that insight? Where are there problems leaking on the public web about that insight? And then how do you communicate about that insight to at scale? So and
Awesome.
we use a bunch of different things to do that, which we can get into some of the methods and methodologies too.
Yep. So, I mean, I think that's a great segue into it. Yeah, what have you seen out there that sort of led you in this direction? And full disclosure for the audience, this is what made me so excited about seeing you on here. You and I both subscribe to a lot of the same things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that this I've been doing B2B growth since about 2016, and I just a lot of the stuff that I saw out there all kind of look the same. And then oh boy, this must have been 2017, maybe 2018. I saw a post by Guillaume who talked about the growth playbooks that they ran at Segment. And so it really got me kind of thinking in a different direction about how do you use large data sets to identify just like the perfect company that has your problem. And if you do that well, the message is written for free. And so this is why I just like I look at a lot of the tools that people buy. And someone messaged me the other day. They're like, "My boss bought Zoom Info without talking to me," and I was like, "What? Why?" And it's like because no one gets fired for buying Zoom Info. And it's just like I think that the problem in outbound here is that our tool we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. So everyone now has had access to large email databases where they can sort of spam at scale. And none of those databases give you any interesting things to say, right? They'll tell you people, they'll give you emails, they'll tell you industries, but they can't help you communicate about your problems. And I think with the kind of onset of tools like ChatGPT, this will only get worse because people right now are already trying to hack attention. And now they're like, well, what if ChatGPT did my homework for me? Right? Like, oh, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, I started seeing that type of stuff coming out, and I started cringing. I was like, "Oh dear God, is that where we're going now?" So yeah, I mean, I'm could not agree more. I think a lot of where we've landed ourselves right now is a combination of two primary facets. One is the tech and the ability to be able to send stuff and do activities at scale, largely automated, and then the corollary to it, and I think they've both largely driven each other, is the access to these databases of all of the information that you need to be able to feed into and power those. And it's the reason why it's become so hard to land in people's inboxes. I mean, at this point, I'm hard pressed to tell somebody to go and onboard or utilize a sequencing tool. Just because it's
Mhm.
like outside of using it as a task manager or to stay on top of like where somebody is and what you need to follow up on, it digs a deeper hole than it helps most people these days.
Yeah, this is the main challenge with outbound is that you have to solve a variety of problems. So you have to solve this deliverability problem. So you have to get in the inbox, and that's like a whole skill set. And there are now up and coming a couple of YC companies that are attempting to do this, like at a full scale. There's tools like Instantly and Smart Lead and uh, they're trying to solve this kind of end-to-end inbox setup, inbox warming, that kind of stuff. So you're not buying these one-off tools. That's like a whole separate series of challenges. There's a challenge like in the center too, which is like, how do you take what a great SDR would do manually and scale that? That's a separate set of problems. But I think that the fundamentally first problem is that you don't understand your market, you don't understand your competition, and you don't have anything interesting to say to them. And that's the hardest challenge. Like, that's the hardest challenge. And there's like a couple of questions that I will use to like get people thinking. That's like, what's a message that none of your competitors could send? What is something that you could say that would not apply to any of your competitors? Um, or another heuristic is what's a message that you can send that will be useful independent of buying your product or service? What is a message that I'm going to get cold that I'm going to forward? And so those are like a couple of heuristics I use, but I think that the reason that people in that are doing outbound right now have challenges is that they don't have enough information about who their customers are, what problems they have, and what language they use to be able to articulate back. So they say things like, "Hey, Jason, I see you got a lamp. I love lamps. Oh my gosh, we're the same person. You want to buy my B2B SaaS garbage?" That's like kind of what a lot of the messages look like.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of how we landed in this spot was, I mean, it really boils down to nothing more than just laziness a lot of the time. It's a whole lot easier to go and say, hey, on my financial spreadsheet, it looks like, if I add a BDR, it's going to increase our pipeline, revenue by X. And so we need to spend down X amount relative to the money we just raised. And that needs to translate into this amount of pipeline and revenue. So it's just an HR problem. And once we've got butts and seats, then we're going to go put some tech in their hands and a list for them to dial and email against. And bam, now we got volume, now we got pipeline, now we got revenue, we got investors that are happy. And we've all seen all too clearly, including like the news, yesterday and today, how that's played out in a lot of tech companies, especially a lot of startups. So I think that had a lot to do with kind of how we got here. But the other interesting piece to it is we've got an entire generation of us in the startup community, especially in the tech space, that largely have never had to operate a profitable company. So much has been built on the backs of VC funding, and hey, what do we need to do to get the next round? And so a lot of us out there never have had to develop these skill sets, other than those of us that have spent our time in the bootstrap, funder founded, type space. And so for those that are scratching their heads trying to figure out what do I do now? Like all of the old playbooks are not working. All of a sudden I've got to be profitable. I've got to demonstrate ROI. How do they actually go out there and implement this and come up with effective strategies and having to do it in a lot of cases on the fly and really fast?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's break down that question. And I think it's easier to back into this question. The idea that we need to scale is part of the problem. Really, what you need to do is the question that I ask my clients is, what is the very best individual email that you could send with perfect information on your market? So don't worry about scale. What is a message that you could send that indicates that someone has a problem? And so, like, what that might look like for my business, for example, is like, I could tell that you're hiring SDRs in their job descriptions that they're thinking about outbound. I looked at your case studies. Here are the types of people that you target. So I've already built a lead list for you of the people that you can go after and the job descriptions at like for those people, because I can match a closed job to a person. Here you go. Bye. Right. So once you can write the perfect message, the message that you think can convey value independently of your product or service, then you need to start turning that into steps to get that information. And so you need to start with like the question, assume that cost and time are no issue. What is the perfect message that you could write as a founder, right? As someone that understands your market. And then you need to turn that into a factory to build that email at the list level. So it's like, great, how do I get this piece of data? How do I get this piece of data? How do I get this piece of data? How do I validate the message? How do I deliver it? Like, so you really need to break that down step by step and then go either search or invent the data. And like we can, if you'd like to, we can get into like different data sources and how I might think about that. But that's the fundamentally first thing that you need to do.
Yep. And you mentioned in that, how would a founder, get that messaging out? You talk a lot in your content about founder-led sales. What exactly are you talking about whenever you say that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, generally, I think that companies will hire an SDR too soon, and I think that they will expect the SDR to solve all their go-to-market challenges. So it's like, "Hi, welcome to the company. We don't have product market fit. We don't know what we're doing, and we'll fire you in a month if you don't fix it for us." Right? So it's like it's just an input. And by the way, like I know you just graduated college last month, like so. So it's like the problem is that SDR is like equipped with the wrong tools. They're incentivized in the wrong way. They aren't given training about things that didn't work. They don't know the market. They often don't know the product, and they're sent off in the wild to go seek attention. And so the challenge really with um, scaling an SDR motion is that you're starting with cotton candy. Like they don't usually have a good, there's no meat and potatoes there. So when I talk about scaling founder-led sales, it's really about this earned, the founder's been punched, right? They have been they have like been on sales calls. They know why people don't buy. They understand the market. They have like adjusted their messaging. So really the best way to do this is to understand what are the insights that they have. What do they know about their customers? What counterintuitive information do they have? And then, like, one of the things that I do is I'll say, just write me the best email. Tell me where the information is that identifies that people have the problem, and then I will go get it at scale. And to give you an example, like for a current client, one of the things that we're doing, they sit at checkout for a large e-commerce retailer, and they're running machine learning models on every checkout cart and just determining if they should provide you a discount. So they're like, Jordan's the kind of guy, he'll just buy it. But there are other people who are like, oh, $5 off. I was going to leave, but I'm going to buy because $5 off, right? Well, if I take a message to market that says, hey Larry, you want some machine learning on your e-commerce? It's like, oh my God, that's like spam, you know. So one of the things that we're doing is I'm saying, great, you have all this great internal data that you have run on millions of cart checkouts. So first, let's go mine that data and pull together actual tactics that people can use to improve a cart checkout. Now, that's not really enough because I can't go to you and you're not going to believe me if I said throw 5% off as a discount on all your things and it will be better. It's like, no, go pound sand, right? So what we have to do is like match a category and product level understanding where we have statistical significance on a test to that data in the market. So I need to go scan a bunch of e-commerce company websites, crawl their website, structure the categories of that site, and then be able to match products and say, you have this product. When we ran a test for this product, we got a 3% lift on carts. Based on your traffic, that should probably be about an extra $55,000 a month. This is one of a million insights. I'll send you 5 more in the next 5 weeks, right? So in that case, I'm actually bringing information from the product, earned proprietary information from the product to the market. And I can do that at scale. And that's kind of the best version of what this founder could do. Like if they spent time looking into the data, researching manually. So I do all of the worst parts of that job, right? But like the customer has to go mine their data, go look at the insights that they have. And then it's just a matter of how do we put together public data to find those people and structure that message at scale. I know I'm just throwing these words around, but it's that's the kind of high level process. So at any of that stuff you want to dig in, happy to, and drop questions in the chat too. By the way, if someone's live and you have questions, drop in the chat.
Yeah, no, I love how you included that this is just all that you have to do. But I mean, one thing that really hit me as you were describing sort of the thing that we're doing with these, poor BDRs straight out of school and stuff like that. If you sit and listen to somebody describe that, I don't know how you do that, and you're like, are you out of your mind? How does that ever seem like a good idea? And yet we have an entire industry that was the model. And that, if you can't say something like that and tell that story to somebody, and it's not really that's the way you're going to do things, it should be pretty telling. So obviously a way to try and tackle this and get to this data-driven side of things and stuff like that would be to go try and find somebody like you, or ideally find you. But for those that are sort of trying to roll it on their own, or even just trying to get up to speed of okay, in theory, I get what Jordan is talking about here, but I don't understand how to apply that to what I'm doing. Or what our company is, or what our motion is. They used an example of a e-retail, but we're not in that space. So, where do you get people to try and begin, or, start thinking through this relative to their motions and what they're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I am running a cohort-based course in March to teach people this. So I'll drop the link in the chat here. But I think that if I think about this from a tools perspective, one of the tools in my stack is Clay, clay.com, and and they have a bunch of different data that's organized in one place. It's basically like a spreadsheet for sales. And so one of the things that you can do with Clay is actually invent your own data sets with Google. And so, for example, you can point Google at a site and say, tell me if they have an integrations page, right? And Google can pull back snippets too. So you can say, find the integrations page, right? So you want to know, well, there's a company called XKit, and they're a tool that connects up to a bunch of CRMs, right? So you plug in XKit and they connect up to CRMs. Well, their perfect customer are folks that really care about integrations and maybe only have 1 or 2 or 3 integrations. So, and Hannah, I'm diving into this now, so we'll talk a little bit about it. So good question. So what they care about is they want to know which companies have which integration. So you can use Clay on 50,000 company domains to point questions at Google for that domain and say, I want to use, and if you just use, if you look, search OS, and I'm going to get this wrong, OSINT or something, I got it wrong. Google dorking is another phrase for this, but Google is a scraper. Billions of dollars have been deployed for Google scrapers. And so you can use it to scrape the sites. So you can do things like find the integrations page. Well, if you find the integrations page and you get all those URLs back, you'll notice, and Google will return the I'm feeling lucky result programmatically in Clay. So you say in URL integrations inside of Google. And then the pages come back. Google says, this is our best guess for the best integrations page. And some people have huge URLs that are a help article, right? So those people don't really care about integrations. You look at the URL structure and it says salesforce.com/integrations. So it's wow, they have a top level directory integrations page, right? But then you can even go further and you can point Google at the integrations page and say, does the word Salesforce appear? Does the word HubSpot appear? Does the word Copper appear? So you can get this better granular understanding to say, great. So this scoring effort becomes the messaging because you can send a message like, hey, Jason, I see that I've already integrated with HubSpot and Salesforce, but you have it integrated with these 8 other CRMs. Did you know that there are X number of people that are using those CRMs to do blah, blah, blah? So that's like one example of a data source. And Hannah, if you want to drop your company URL, I'll pull it up on my screen and maybe I can give you some specific examples that might be relevant to you. I do these like go to market live hot takes. It's always easier to talk about a specific example. The other thing is like I'm scraping jobs. So like I sell my jobs data. Planet.com. That's a great URL. Can you and say a little bit more about who you're targeting in the B2B world? So, Leslie, write me a little bit more about the types of people that you're targeting.
Yeah, and while she sends that in and you pull that up, I mean, it was eye opening for me as I've been hacking my way through this stuff for most of my career,
Yeah.
and it's been really interesting seeing how this has played out relative to the democratization of the tech and the tools, as well as the ever increasing amount of data and insights that we have access to. And when I first interviewed with my CRO of my previous, the most recent company that I worked for before, I came over to Red Genius, he was telling me, he was like, I feel like I think we got an unfair advantage here because we own the open source tech that powers what we're doing. And so upshot of that is like we create all of the publicly available documentation, guides, stuff like that. And so most people are already coming to our site, who are using the open source version. We're trying to upsell them. And like he's telling me that, and I'm just like literally salivating. I'm like, that would be amazing. That'd be such a huge sandbox to go play in. And so, wound up building out like the most sophisticated, complex CDP that I've seen at a company. And we were able to tell like not only who these companies were, but like what their pain points were, what their hot buttons were. We were able to go marry that with jobs data, like you're talking about, being able to go and mine what people were talking about on dark social, LinkedIn, stuff like that. And by the time that we had reps reaching out to them, like we could equip them with like, not only is this high quality qualified, but like, hey, here are your talking points. Here are the things they're interested in. Here are the things they're trying to solve for. And it's like, holy crap, when you can do that, it is a game changer.
Yeah, and this is exactly right too, because you can, and you don't need to have the rep actually send the email. So once you can do that, once you already have that research, you can just automate the email. I do want to get back to Leslie's question here that so planet.com, their sort of H1 here is daily Earth data to see changes, make better decisions. She's going after in B2B, the VP of digital agriculture. So I think what you need to do is figure out, well, what will these people care about and how can you identify what they care about? So one of the things that I might do, and feel free to ping me and I'll give you some exports here, but like I'd look in the job descriptions. So see if you can find keywords when they are hiring digital agriculture folks and see what of your value props. This is like the other part of this data sifting is like, Planet may do 100 things, right? Like, and you can't survive with a message like, here's one of 100 things, which is useful to you, right? You have to lead with the problem that they're having. And generally, you need to think about how can I find problems. So this is where like Google searching is actually pretty good. So you can just do a really quick Google hack here, which is like in URL jobs or in URL careers in the box, and just type in some key phrases like better, like equip us with I mean, and people are going to say coded language, right? Equip us with a better understanding of our environmental footprint or something, right? And you're like, okay, well, when they say that they mean this. And here's how your value prop ties to that problem. That might be one way to do it. For one of my customers, we're scraping 10Ks, SEC filings, because for public companies, they have to like talk about their biggest fears. It's like a come to Jesus moment. So we can see what the companies are focused on and what they care about and what they're trying to drive. For one of my, it's just like unrelated example, but for another one of my companies, what we did is we found what are called ESG reports, environmental, social, governance. So we pointed a Google search at the company URL and say, give me any file type PDF that mentions environmental social governance or has ESG in the URL. And then once we ingested that PDF, we looked for this is a company that helps women get promoted, or like basically levels the playing field between men and women to get promoted. And so we said, like, who is investing in this? Who cares about leveling the playing field? Who is saying to the world, we have a dedication to do this? And then what we're doing right now is we're actually pulling the VPs at those companies and using AI to score genders and be like, hey, seems like you really care about this, but did you know that 89% of your VPs are men? So how are you thinking about balancing gender at the VP level to make sure that that you can practice what you preach? I wouldn't say it like that, but you get the idea.
Awesome. So one of the things that's always funny and fun to play with whenever you're doing, things that are, data driven, fairly automated at scale is inevitably something goes wildly wrong and oftentimes with comical results. Can you tell us a story about one of those that jumps to mind?
Oh my gosh. And yeah, this is kind of the challenge of doing anything at scale, really, is like you kind of have to be I always joke, it's like if you think about the Olympics, right? The the saddest person is the silver medalist, right? Because they just missed gold. The happiest person is like weirdly kind of the bronze medalist because they're like, I didn't think in a million years I'd ever be on this stage, you know? And so like what I tell to my clients is like, we're not going for perfection. We just want to get on the podium. So really it's like, what's the lowest amount of calories that you can spend to get a positive reply? It's like, I'm always kind of thinking about that. Um, well, I have to be very careful with some of this gender stuff because I can't. I mean, I'm at scale. I'm using AI to score people's names, so like sometimes the AI is going to be wrong. So I can't be like Jason as a woman. Like like that's gonna get me in trouble. So I generally try to like write around like the fuzzy targeting failures. I did have someone this wasn't a targeting problem, I guess, but I had a customer that has in his outbound signature has his pronouns listed, and this guy's like, "I'll never buy from someone that lists their pronouns." I was like, dude, that's more about you than me. So like you'll get some really interesting like and weird hate mail sometimes, but nothing like nothing. Fortunately, nothing drastic comes to mind about like how I made a mistake in targeting. But it happens all. I mean, it happens all the time.
I mean, I think my biggest, advice and lessons learned on that front is, uh, one, don't be too afraid of it. Like it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
Uh, Two, own it when it happens because when you
yeah,
do that, almost universally something positive comes from it. Because it's like, oh hey, you're human. You mess something up and you're capable of owning it. And
yeah.
it's not the kind of thing you want to go do intentionally all the
Well,
time.
actually, it's funny. I know people that will do this. Like the worst version of this is people like sent for my iPhone. I'm like, get the hell out of here, 2007. But like I do, people will be like misspellings, or they'll do that kind of stuff to basically say, oh, like I call this like attention hacking, which is like, oh, I'm a real person. I sent this. There's like, it's funny because most of the challenge that people think about in outbound is like, how can I make you think that I took the time to write this email myself versus a
Right.
sequence? But and there's I chat with Eric Nowalski all the time about this, because he's very good at this at scale, and he'll do a lot of things that I think are silly, but that actually improve reply
Oh,
rates.
every time I talk to him, I'm like, What's your latest one?"
Yeah, he always has the latest, I was going to call you on this number, but I thought I'd email you instead. Of like, "Get the fuck out of here, Eric." So, but, the data shows that it improves reply rate, so who am I to say? Um, but I will say that, like, the other thing I'm doing right now for this exact reason is, I'm working with Andy Moat on, of Gated, to build a unsubscribe page where we'll pay you $10. Where Gated will donate $10 to charity, if you'll provide feedback on the message. Um, So it's like a 2-question unsubscribe form where, if you fill it in, you'll be unsubscribed, and, but you need to provide feedback. Like, did I get the because there's 100 things. Maybe I got the targeting wrong, right? Maybe the message, like, oh, people have seen this message before. It's like not unique. Like maybe you don't have the problem now, so I targeted you at the wrong time. Like, so there's 1,000. Oh, like you're not the person responsible at your organization for solving this problem. Um, so I do think we need better feedback loops here, but I do think that you can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. But
Yeah.
the key thing here is to not ship crap. And if you build the system right, you can rapidly test things. And that is the muscle, as opposed to the SDR muscle where you just like hire people and you're like activities, activities, activities. This is a way to say, no, let's take a step back. Let's build the system to test rapidly at scale, and then just test, 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 and get it wrong, get it wrong, get it wrong. I mean, like when I talk to my clients, it's like my value is to test and close doors for you. I'm not a
Mhm.
lead gen company. I'm a testing company. Only you will know if you have a message that is very interesting to your market, if you understand your customers, if you understand your market. I will never know that. But I can be the conduit to ask the best version of the question in the way that you would ask it to the market.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that if you do this well enough and you're providing good enough value and you're speaking to the problem and the right audience and stuff like that, the vast majority of people won't care whether it's automated or not. And the
Mhm,
sophisticated ones will
mhm.
actually be extremely impressed that you managed to do that in a largely automated
Oh,
fashion.
yeah.
Um,
It's
and then on the fail side of it, two quick stories or anecdotes. I had one where something got messed up with like their record, and so the invite went out to Sally, and the guy was it was like Dale or something like that, and so he comes on the call and he's like, "Got your invite to Sally." I was like, "Oh God, sorry about that." He was like, "No, I was just wondering how you knew because I'm only Sally on weekends."
it's so good. Yeah.
And I was like, and this was like somebody higher up at like Microsoft or something. We were trying to work an integration out with. It was just dying laughing.
Oh, it's
And
so good.
then
It's
the
so
other
good.
one was we had one where we had never actually we had built out the template. This was early days, but we actually hadn't dropped in the merge tags from where we had like built it out, and so like it still said like hi first name like blah blah, and the guy replied back and he was like hi, first name, founder at SaaS company, trying to pitch me. It's just like, just threw it right back at us. It was just like, this is great.
That's so good. Yeah, I mean, I think that, usually when, I've had plenty of engagements just go totally south. I had one engagement that brought me more leads than the customer, because they were like, so what oh god, this was such a good playbook. What we did is we looked at, Segment had this, startup program. So for 2 years, you got Segment for free. And you had to fit certain criteria, right? You had to be founded a certain date and raised. So we looked back in time at we took, Segment users, you can get that with built with. So we looked back in time and we said, when did companies install Segment? When were they founded? How much money had they raised at the time? So we said, aha, this company was on the Segment starter program. It's been now 20 months. So the free juice is about to end. So I'm like, "Hey, Jason, I saw that you installed Segment on this date, which probably means that you got it for free. And I don't know if you know this, but based on your install date, you got about 3 more months. And given your website's traffic, you're going to start paying $20,000 to $40,000 a year. It's going to be a surprise $20,000 to $40,000 jump from free. Do you want to use our product? We're the same thing, and we will and people are like, "This message is, I don't need your thing. Our segment's working great for us, but this message is amazing. Who sent it?" And I was like, "Oh no." I like overshadowed the client. Like it was terrible.
That's amazing, but it also raises something, relative to the data and the signals that you're operating off of. And so, where you were talking about identifying people using Segment that installed on certain days and stuff like that, you're of course talking about technographic, profiles and data. And technographic is a great, perfect example of how important it is to understand the data that you're leveraging and how much mileage can vary depending on one
Yeah.
thing versus another. And so, technographic in particular, there's some technologies that is really, really easy to try and figure out like who's using it. It's pretty definitive, like yes or no, and your false positive, false negatives are extremely small. There's other technology products that are notoriously difficult to get to. And it's more like, hey, we're trying to do rough correlation. If you use X, Y, and Z, then you probably use that. But we have no direct evidence that you're actually using that.
Yeah.
And so, how do you deal with the variability within the reliability of the data, especially when there's a pretty steep learning curve if it's not a data source that you're used to using?
Yeah, I do think about this fidelity question pretty heavily, and really, the databases that you can get access to, uh, if there's like Built With, for example, Built With has technographic data. SimilarWeb has traffic data, right? Like, and the Built With data, because they're like scraping the whole internet. Um, like sometimes there's zombie code. Sometimes like people aren't using like you think about chatbots, right? So for like a client of mine, they're like, oh well, we use the data about who's using Drift or Intercom from Built With, but it's like that it may not be live on their site, right? So you're gonna look like a pretty big idiot if you're like, I see you're using Intercom. They're like, nah, we took that off a long time ago. So in that case, what we do is we'll have to deploy like a custom scraper to go interact with the bot, and we can like chat with the bot too. So like there are other ways to derive data too. I look at my jobs data a lot to get other like behind the scenes. Like I have a if you message me, I have a list of 47,000 Salesforce users. So just like I just looked at jobs back in time who mentioned Salesforce in their job description. So I'll send that to anyone that wants it. Um, so job descriptions will be a pretty good source of data. There are also ways that you can invent data. So one of the things that we're trying with a client right now is we're looking at people that have been in their role for a little over a year, and we're looking at people that at a company that have been in their role the longest at the company without a promotion or a job change, right? And we're going to say, hey, Jason, we wanted to understand what the promotion opportunities at company X were like, and if you had any opinion about it, and we're going to take your anonymous survey to your leadership. So, and you can imagine if you've been there for 9 years and have the same title, like maybe you're pissed. Maybe you're like I deserve a promotion. Or if you're there, if you're an ambitious person and they're a year and a half, and you haven't had a promotion, like you're thinking about it, it's on your mind. I'm going to invent data that doesn't exist, get their feedback, and then bring that back to management. And so sometimes you can just ask other people in the organization to be like, could you do the work for me? And if you're creative enough, sometimes you can get them to do the work for you.
No, it's fantastic. You and I both talked, a lot about, in different contexts, different conversations around, just how broken the BDR outbound model is. That's what we kicked off this conversation with. I've increasingly come to the conclusion, I've run, marketing, demand gen, growth, whatever at, virtually every company that I've worked at. And part of that has been, as sort of out of the ordinary or minority as it's been, I've managed the BDR teams, hired, built out the BDR teams under that side of the equation versus sales. What's your take on, well, one, whether BDRs and how much BDRs should be part of the equation, but in particular, where should they live organizationally within an organization? Is it under sales? Is it under marketing demand gen? Is it its own thing?
Yeah. Well, I think that the problem is that the role is too big. It like just encompasses too many things. And so I think that the best version of this is where an SDR is just taking inbound leads, for some version of inbound. Like it doesn't matter where maybe it's generated with outbound, but they're responding to someone that's interested, right?
Mhm.
And not doing their own like surfing the internet and clicking around, like which is just a waste of time. And maybe one version of this is where you can get such a granular understanding of your ICP that an SDR can be focused on like the top 100 accounts. Um, and when I say 100 accounts, I'm not saying uh, um, only companies between this size and that size. I'm talking about like who has actual problems. Um,
Mhm.
uh, and so I think that we need to remove messaging out of that role. We need to remove actual like doing outbound out of that role. And I think that if we can kind of remove those pieces from the role, maybe it can make much more sense as someone that's really, really good at conducting an investigation on a sales call. And that's what they become good at. So I think we need to kind of shrink the role, adjust the expectations, and then just like train them to be great at that process and not do anything else, because that's the people are like, oh, my SDRs don't do work, like I have to like, oh my god. Who does outbound in that world? I think that you need to build a system to do outbound in that world, and that needs to be the head of demand gen, the CRO, the head of sales, that are working on a system to build without the people being responsible for sending the message. So you sit on a large data set like mine. You ask questions of those data sets, and you have a factory like system to go ask questions of the data. Like we have a tool that converts natural language into SQL queries, so I can query large databases. So I can say, give me everyone at these companies who has been there the longest that has titles like this, right? You can get some of that stuff from Apollo, but sometimes you want to ask a more complicated question. And then if you can get really good at that factory process where you set on a lot of large data, like you have like probably an internal scraper, you have and we'll teach you how to do this in the course too. So you have an internal scraper, you sit on like some of LinkedIn's data, you will you'll go have like set on some of my jobs data, right? So you have a bunch of data sources. You can mix and match them very easy and turn that into a train that will go get the leads, go get the emails, clean the emails, send the emails in like warmed up inboxes. And you get really good at that motion in an automated scale. That way you don't have to just throw bodies at this problem.
Could not agree more, and that's the reason why those teams and roles have been under marketing demand gen whatever where I've worked. Increasingly, I'm becoming convinced that any really solid team on the demand gen side of things needs somebody like you as part of the team, and probably needs that person married with an actual data analyst, so that we can actually go pump all that data into a CDP, a database,
Yep.
whatever,
Yep.
actually go run the analysis on it. Somebody actually understands what statistical significance is, and we're not playing this game of like, hey, I know theoretically the rule of large numbers, but I'm going to go apply it to a small data set, with all of the correlated and corresponding problems that come out of that. One of my challenges, even though I'm 100% completely sold on that being something that probably needs to be standard in every team that I'm building out going forward, is what in the world do I go look for to go find those people? Like, I'm fortunate that I've got a lot of people like you, like Eric, stuff like that I know, but that's just because I've been in the space doing it for a long time, and we're a fairly tight little network of people, and we bounce
Yeah.
ideas off of each other and stuff like that. But if you're somebody in the audience, you're like, okay, I buy that. I need to go find a Jordan to go bring in my team and have full
Yeah.
time.
Uh,
Where do you go to find that? How do you look for that?
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna reverse engineer what my agency does so that you can see like what are the pieces here that I deploy to build this internally, which is like a little bit meta here. But um so like the maybe the first person that you should hire is just like a great outsourcer. Like who is someone that is like exceptional at task, and pay them what is like an ungodly amount of money in the country that they're from, and you can afford to do that, right? And so it's like you can get someone at a really low like US dollar cost that is an exceptional outsourcer and hire them full time. And so these are folks that are going to actually like, because like one of the things that Eric and I talk about is that this process is not hard, but it's convoluted.
Mhm.
Um, and so you need an outsourcer. I would go hire a scraper. So who's someone that you can go have scrape data for you, go scrape websites, pull like, and the data that you want is like in some weird government database. Like we were talking about Planet, right? Like there's like some I mean, and this is like not right for their customers, but like there's like some FCC filing database of people that have to register if they care, like, so this data exists. It's public. Like I scraped all the trucking companies in the United States because you have to register if you're a trucking company, and like they have to tell you all these like how many truckers they have and that kind of stuff. So get an outsourcer, get a scraper, go investigate better data sets to buy. So that is not Zoom Info. Sure, go buy an Apollo license, but you need to buy better data sets. So that's like problem data sets, like my jobs data set, or like other data sets that are really relevant to your industry. And sometimes the scraping person can pull them, right? And that might be like store leads to get information about like e-commerce sites that people have spent more time getting granular information about your ICP. Go buy that data. You need a deliverability person, so someone that is like setting up these systems, that is warming emails, that is like thinking about, basically they're always thinking about how, because Google's smart and they keep changing stuff. And so like even in some of our messages, we're using GPT-3 to just increase variance. So it's like, this is the message we want to send, increase variance, so that every individual email is like slightly different. Or even have people like click and sending emails in some cases for one of our products, so that Google's like, oh, this is like a person sending this thing, not a technology. So email deliverability person, an outsourcer, a scraper, and then go buy some data sets. Are you still using Outreach? I don't think so. It's like expensive, like certainly not the. I mean, like, look, I'm like the guy in the basement, right? Like I'm the guy that will like do everything. Like I'll hack around it. Like I don't integrate with any of my customer systems, because I just have learned I can give someone here is a list, upload this to Outreach and send, and they don't do it. And part of that is like, oh well, I don't have access to be able to upload emails in Outreach because there's like version control. I'm like, oh god. And tools like Outreach are not fixing for email deliverability. They're just like helping you spam. So this kind of tool set of the Outreach and the Zoom Info, like it's going by the wayside. Like emails will become cheaper free. Like contact data will become cheaper free. And the types of tools, like we're using Smart Lead in my agency, that Eric manages a lot of the deliverability for the stuff that I do. So I think that there will be these new tools that are aligned to the problems that sellers have. But I will say this, deliverability specifically is a really it's a nasty one, because it feeds on itself. So you send a bad message, you send a generic message, it hurts your deliverability, and it just spirals from there. So that's the hard thing, is really to fix deliverability. So any deliverability tool that you buy, if you send crappy messages, they will eventually go to spam and your deliverability will go to zero. So this really has to start at the messaging level and the data level, and then it flows from there.
Yeah, it reminds me when I spun up my agency that I was doing in between astronomer and here. I was trying to figure out, okay, lessons I learned last time I ran an agency. It was like, what are the things I want to stay away from, and what are the things I really want to nail down as far as offerings and things that we will do. And it was right about that time, people started playing around with like the swapping out inboxes and working on deliverability and stuff like that. And I heard people telling me about that. And I was like, fascinating, love it, would want to play with it. Absolutely the last thing I want to touch. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
I do not want to touch email. I do not want to touch deliverability for all of those reasons you just laid out. Like it is such a beast. And it's a moving target. Like no sooner do you figure something out than it changes on you. And email is hard.
yeah,
Like it's
yeah, definitely.
necessary and it will probably always be the most effective lever that you can pull, but it is not easy.
Yeah, yeah. This is the I am forced to do deliverability. So this is why I'm like, yo, Eric, can you just like do this for me? I'll pay someone to do this, like, because I don't ever want to think about this. This is not my, like, it's not my value, but it obstructs my value, right? So it's like you would never come to me and be like, Jordan, get me the best inbox delivery. It's just like some shit that I have to do so that it's like if I can't get in the inbox, then it doesn't matter what great message that I send. But there will always be people that like Eric was telling me about a company that he was looking at that is like spinning up Chromium browsers to like click and send emails as if a person was doing it. So like which is just, I mean, and I think that some of these there are services too that will do this spin text thing that will like, hey, hi, hello, that will like adjust your message around the edges. Like I think that there's a gigantic business to be made where some company, and none of the tools that we have explored to date beat the system that we built for deliverability. But I would love to outsource this. It just, to your point, Jason, it takes someone that's going to like go to the nth degree, just like, how can you just make it as if a person sent this email and beat Google? And that's like, that bar is so high. There's a lot of engineers at
Oh God,
Google. So
it is so hard to do.
yeah.
And I mean, I think stuff like that where you got to really think outside the box and you've got to know the ins and outs of really difficult systems that are largely black boxes. Like that's really hard to find and that's really hard to train.
Changing
Uh,
black boxes. Black
yeah.
boxes
Oh
that
yeah.
change. Like it's the
Oh
shape
yeah.
of the black box changes as people learn. Yeah.
But back to your kind of reverse engineering of the role or roles that you need to go try and hire for or locate in. The two X factors that for me are the hardest things to find, train, identify, whatever is, that understanding of the complexity of it. And, a lot of that is just based on nothing more than like, hey, this is somebody that's a hacker by nature and just enjoys this stuff and all of that. But the other is somebody that really understands data and where it lives and how to go find it. Because I think the central piece that we've not really called out and named that really drives the success or failure of these things that we're talking about is intent signals. And those intent signals live in all kinds of places. Most of them places most of us haven't even really thought to go look. I mean, most people think intent signals, that's going out and buying Bombora and having them tell me, like, hey, this is somebody that's interested in this. But really valuable intent signals are things like the jobs data that you go and
Yeah.
mine and build databases around. It's being able to look at and identify where people are talking about and having conversations. It's being able to oftentimes engineer first party intent signals like, hey, we own all of the publicly available documentation and guides around this thing. And
Yeah.
so if you're interested in it, and that's one of the biggest qualifiers out there, then you're going to find your way to us. And now we can go and figure out who those people are. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a conversation I'm having right now with a different company, and they're like, our lead scoring model sucks. Like it's not telling us anything of value. Like we're going after these high scoring leads and like it's not. And I was like, lead scoring is not where you need to go. It's not
Yeah.
what you need to
Yeah.
do. Like you need to identify intent signals. They're like, oh, intent signals. Like, and right back to it. Do we need to go buy Bombora? And I'm like, no,
No.
no.
Yeah.
Like you
That
need to
yeah.
engineer your intent
Yes.
signals.
Yeah, this is exactly right. And the problem with this like a notion of what like 6sense and Bombora or even G2, it's also a black box, right? It didn't say that Jason, the head of revenue at a company, is actively searching for this. There's like this domain sort of hung around a website. It was like, was it an intern? Like who was it? And then what do you say? Hey, Jason, I've been following you around the internet. I noticed that you're on a G2 page. Can I get you to buy my software? It's like you got to be that creepy guy in the corner, which is like, I don't understand. So harassment, engineering, intent signals. So yeah, like marketing teams wants Bombard or 6sense because they don't have better ideas. But the question is really, the question like and how to think about intent is also like you can score your market and look at problems that they have, and so you have to get a little creative about this. This is the thing that no one spends time on, which is like, Spend time on the internet. Like go look up, like, are there government databases that talk about your problem? Go on the company's website. Are they talking about on the website? Go in LinkedIn profiles. Are people talking about LinkedIn? I'm releasing a feature where I can get anyone the last 11 LinkedIn posts for people. So I pulled a bunch of B2B folks. I pulled their number of followers, and then I'm pulling their last 11 LinkedIn posts and running OpenAI on it to say, summarize some of this for me, right? So now I can start to get, like, what's better intent than someone posting on LinkedIn saying, these are the things that I'm thinking about at my company now, right? Um, and so, yeah, the thinking is different, and it is hard to find these, like, creative people. But let me tell you, it's like the founder, because and maybe it's the head of sales, whoever know, and it probably is the CSMs. Honestly, go have a conversation with the people that are having a conversation with the customers, right? And they'll say something like, "Oh well, we tried Facebook for a long time, but then we stopped it, and that's when we did this thing." And you're like, "Aha, okay, well, how can we determine if someone is they turned off their Facebook ads, right?" Well, like, SimilarWeb has traffic data, so then you can see, like, if it drops. Like, Facebook has an ad library that you can scrape and say, okay, great. Like, who is, like, and it'll say if they're active. So monitor that. But just like Jason was saying, like, you have to build that in house, and that's not only that's a compounding advantage for you. And to give you some idea of how this advantage compounds, I uh I built a tool that matches a closed job description to a person. So it's like, this is Jason's job. Here are the things that he's responsible for at Rev Genius. So I open source this data, jobs.blueprintgtm.com. Anyone can see it. There's going to be about 88,000 people that will eventually be on there. So by doing this, though, it's now a growth channel for me. So I scored all this data. I don't have to email anyone about it. I put these pages programmatically up on Google. Google helps bring people to me. So this effort for outbound is really for go-to market, and you can deploy the data in a bunch of different ways.
No, absolutely. And, on the engineering of intent signal side of it, like, it can get complex, it can get creative, all of that stuff, but it can also be dead simple. So if you've got, call it three personas you primarily sell to, and each one of those has two primary pain points that you're trying to speak to. And you want to get things to a point where, as salespeople are having conversations with them, you're honing in on exactly what that hot button is, whatever. Guess what? Build content out that you're putting out in front of your prospects that speaks explicitly to that problem or that pain point, and see who engages with it.
Yeah.
And like, now we've captured that data, we've captured those intent signals, and now we can equip our reps with it, or we can get sophisticated with our ad campaigns, and we can run ads around that content and those pain points at those people and at those companies. And so it's not rocket science. It can be rocket science. It can be really complex, but it doesn't have to be. And you can start really dead simple. And honestly, some of the most effective ones I've ever run were some of the simplest ones.
Yep. Yeah. And I think about this all the time, which is just like, how can I reduce the amount of calories that I spend on this play? Right. Like, and I have a problem when I'm like, spend all the calories on this play. And it's like, no, like, let's just, like, find the lowest common denominator that works. And so I think that the thing to think about here, and like a good example of this is, like, people in their job descriptions will say, you'll be our first AE, you'll be our first head of marketing, you'll be our first. So you can actually build a lead list of all the companies that are hiring the first type of that person, go back in time and run an ad, be like trying to figure out the blah 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 as the first account executive. You can run an ad to the people that started as the first account executive, right? Like, people will click on that ad, right? Because they're like, I am the first account executive. How did they know, right? Like,
oh,
you're
absolutely.
exactly
I mean, the jobs data where somebody's hiring for whatever is really powerful. The jobs data where they just hired that person and you can target that person that just started is huge, because, like, they're trying to get in and figure out where to go and what to do and all of that. But Jordan, I could do this literally all day. We're down to a couple of minutes. Obviously, from the engagement from the audience, the questions, stuff like that, I'm certain there's going to be people wanting to reach back out to you and continue asking questions. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so drop my LinkedIn in the chat here. I'm Jordan at blueprintgtm.com. Feel free to email me. If you mention this LinkedIn Live, I'll give you a free jobs export so you can see. I can query by keywords for you. So don't give me a list of titles. Tell me what are the problems that your customers are solving. I'll give you a free jobs export so you can see this thing in action.
Awesome, awesome. And I'll wrap up with this piece. I think one of the most important things to take away that we didn't call out is something that's impossible to scale. Well, I'm not going to say impossible, hard to scale. Do things that do not scale easily, and in particular, go talk to your prospects, go talk to your customers. That's how you're going to get those insights and those signals that then you've got to go reverse engineer ways to scale up and get to in an automated fashion. It all comes from those conversations. And if you've got a product that you can use internally, make sure you're eating your own dog food, because now you can actually have these insights internally across your team and yourself individually. And so those are absolutely critical.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Jason. I'm grateful to
Awesome.
have the
That has been a
conversation. I appreciate
blast.
it.